There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Shawn, the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel and to my annual most anticipated new releases video for 2024. A little bit of a announcement at the beginning. It's not very dramatic, but I'm not going to spend so much of my money acquiring these books as I did last year. When I looked at the bail rate for the new releases, it was abysmal, but most new releases are crap, and I say that with some authority and, you know, a lot of subjectivity. The backlist is really where I should probably be spending more and more of my time because, you know, there's the books on the backlist have a reputation. You can check out umpteen reviews and talk to your friends and so on, but new releases, in 1948 it would have been the same. Most new releases were crap. Have I dissuaded you from watching the rest of this video? The reason I'm mentioning this is not to be a curmudgeon, you know that I am, but to say I am only going to auto-buy books by writers that I love, and there's a handful of those here, and maybe books that I don't know much about that I'm willing to take a chance on from small presses and independent presses. But everything else, if I get to it at all in 2024, I'm going to get them from the library, and I'm prepared to wait up to 6 months for that opportunity and not keep buying books, bailing on them, and then trading them in, which, you know, I get a certain amount back in trade, but I have a library 10 minutes down there, and my income is shrinking month by month, so I'm just not going to buy as many new books as I did last year. But I still get all excited by the shiny new things, and that's what this video is all about, so without further ado, if you're still with me, here are the books I'm interested in. I've organized them by month of release, and that's information found on Goodreads, and that may not be the same in the part of the world that you live in. I just pulled the first publication date I could find on Goodreads, and it's often different in the UK and North America or whatever, so there are Goodreads links in the show notes, so you can do some more research on that. And also, I don't spend a lot of time talking about what the book is about in these kind of videos, both because I like to go into a book blind, so the less I know about the book, the better I like it, but also because I wouldn't have time. I've got, I think, 33 books to tell you about, so if you want more information on what they're about, I'm going to give you a one sentence something or other about it, but just click on the Goodreads links for more information. All right, now that the ground rules have been established, let's get started. Quite a few coming out in January. The first one is How We Named the Stars by Andrés and Ordorica. And it is a queer novel set between the US and Mexico. A debut novel exploring belonging, grief, and first love. Well, those are in my wheelhouse, so it sounds very interesting. And that's all I'm going to take the time to tell you. But like I say, click on the links. Also, this might be an auto-buy because of how much I loved, I think it's this lesbian author's first novel, but it's the first one I've read. Emily Austin has a new novel coming out in January as well, called Interesting Facts About Space. I loved her Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead, just a few months ago, so I'm very curious about this one. The protagonist is obsessed with space, and she has a phobia for bald men. What else would you need to know? That sounds just fabulous. And Emily Austin is a Canadian writer. I don't know where she lives, maybe Ontario. Here is a novel by a woman in translation, so if I don't get to it before, it's certainly a contender for Women in Translation Month in August. It's coming out in January, though. It is called The Case of Sem. I think that's how it would be pronounced, or perhaps Kem, by Vera Mutafchieva. Oh, it's a tome. 550 pages. She is Bulgarian, but I don't know what language she writes in. I'm assuming it's translated from Bulgarian, but I don't know that with 100% certainty. If I didn't say already, the translator is Angela Rodel. It's a historical novel set in the 15th century to do with the death of the Ottoman Sultan and his elder son taking the throne, and then it's quite a empire kind of political military novel. I actually don't know how interesting that will be. I'll wait to hear some reviews before I jump on that one, but it certainly has the potential to be interesting. At 560 pages. I'm gonna wait for some reviews. And finally, in January, Libyan novelist Hisham Matar has a new novel called My Friends. I read his earlier novel 5 or so years ago called In the Country of Men, and I really liked some things about it and didn't like others. And I remember thinking to myself in writing in my Goodreads review that this was an author I was going to follow and hope that the things I didn't like would kind of disappear from his evolving style. So here I am wanting to try his latest offering, and I believe he writes in English. There's no information here about a translator. My Friends is about a young boy growing up in Benghazi. Check out my most recent We and Other Words for an interesting etymological link between Benghazi and varnish. Young boy growing up in Benghazi hears a very strange short story read on the radio. And that starts him on a journey. And goodness, that certainly captures my imagination. And now, here are the novels coming out in February, and there's a whole swathe of them. Tron Time by Cormac James. Cormac James is an Irish writer, and this story, or at least part of it, takes part in Norway. Let's see here. It's a queer novel, and a son collapses, perhaps even drops dead on the street. I'm just, with eyes half closed, skimming the synopsis here, but there's two mothers, so I don't know if that means they're a lesbian couple or a stepmother and a mother, but stuff happens from there. It sounds very dramatic with lots of stuff about tragedy and healing and grief, so it has the potential to be fantastic. And certainly already, based on the ARCs, the advanced copies, it's got a 4.3 rating. And Cormac James is rather handsome. Irish writer who lives in France. Next is Ways and Means by Daniel Lefferts. I don't know how else that would be pronounced. Debut novel. A young gay man comes to New York with a plan, escaping his Rust Belt poverty, and gets mixed up with an older gay couple. So that has the potential to be either really terrible or possibly great. Lots of sex and lots of art in the story. Well, it would definitely be one that I wouldn't rush out to buy the hardcover until I've heard some reviews and try to get a library or an audiobook or something. Here is another novel by a woman in translation, and I don't know what her sexuality is, but this is a queer novel. It's called Sons, Daughters by Ivana Bodrožić, translated from the Croatian by Helen Elias-Bursać. I've read books that she has translated. I don't remember which ones, but I'm assuming that I enjoyed them. Oh, and this one sounds fascinating. It's coming out at the end of February in English. A wrenching love story between a transgender man and a woman, as well as between a mother and a daughter. Oh, say no more. I don't know where it's set. The synopsis doesn't say, but I don't care where it's set. That one might be one I'd buy because it's published by 7 Stories. This is definitely an auto buy, even though I'm 2 books behind, but he's one of my favorite writers, the queer French writer Édouard Louis. And his new novel, it's called Change, A Method. Not in love with the title, but I'm in love with Édouard Louis' novels. But he put out 2 I don't remember if they're memoirs, autofiction, one about his father and one about his mother, and they're both very short. I haven't gotten to those. I might try to get to at least one of them before I read this one, but this one is coming out in February, and it is a return to an autobiographically queer story. Well, that's absolutely all I need to know about an Édouard Louis novel, because I just love his queer fiction. He's just one of my very most favorite gay male writers writing today. And that is based on absolutely loving The End of Eddie and History of Violence. Those books just devastated me. Here's another gay novel. I don't know anything about Andrew McMillan. I've heard his name, but he has a new novel coming out called Pity. And it's in an industrial town, and I think that would be in the UK. I believe Andrew McMillan is he a Scottish writer? No, he was born in Yorkshire. And this novel is about queer life in a town that was once a hub of industry, and in terms of gay life, you just go cruising toilets. But plot ensues. But the town has kind of collapsed and is just a shadow of its former self. And the protagonist, who's now in midlife, is now struggling, I assume, with coming out, but with a part of his identity he's long tried to mask. Does that sound like a gay coming out story to you? It certainly does to me. Fabulous. And McMillan is no slouch. He's got even less hair than me and looks pretty darn good. He looks very young, too. Next is Fervour by Toby Lloyd. And I'm not sure about this one because one of the genres that's checked on Goodreads is horror. I'm reading a horror novel in January. I'll be starting it around the time that you see this video. So I'm hoping to get over myself about horror fiction because it seems like the genre is moving and embracing more, like there's actually well-written horror. I'm still a little skeptical, but anyway, this one is a story of a close-knit Jewish family in London who suspect their daughter is a witch. I'm going to wait for reviews on this. Based on the art, based on the reviews of the advanced copies, this comes out in February, it's got a 3.6 rating. So I'm just going to dangle that in front of you. Maybe you'll be more interested in it than me, but it does sound like it has the potential to be interesting. Maybe. Here is an autobuy. This is one of the ones that I'm the most excited about for the whole year. The indigenous novelist who, however comfortably or uncomfortably, lives in America. His second novel's coming out, Wandering Stars. I can't wait. I loved There with all my heart. And even though it wasn't, perfect, but it's a book that's really stuck with me and has made me crave his next book. And here it is. Wandering Stars traces the legacies of the Sand Creek Massacre of 1864 and then the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, which an industrial school quite similar, at least in a Canadian context. I know this is an American context, but in a Canadian context, that was basically a residential school. And finally in February, and this is a author photo autobuy. This guy, he's a queer Nigerian writer. This is his debut, I'm pretty sure. And let me see if I can pronounce his name. Chukwuebuka Ibeh. I don't know if that's right, but that's the best I can do. He's 22. He's from Port Harcourt. He's had his writing published in McSweeney's and the New England Review of Books. And this is his debut novel, Blessings. And he is really active on social media. So and the cover is beautiful. And he's beautiful. And he's really a master of self-promotion. So I have been excited about this book for several months. The young gay male protagonist's father catches him fooling around with a family servant, and then he gets banished to a Christian boarding school, and plot ensues. Speaking of queer African literature, here is another one, and this one's a debut. I'm excited about it. I'll decide based on, it's got a really good advance rating. Hasn't been published yet, but based on people reviewing the advance reader copies, it's at 4.36 out of 5 stars. It's called These Letters End in Tears by Musih, Tedji, Xavier. Set in Cameroon, and for some reason, there is a lot of fabulous queer writing going on in Cameroon, and not just queer writing. I have read a lot of really interesting novels that come from Cameroon. So here's another one that I hope is great. A love story between a Christian girl and a Muslim girl. Sounds explosive. And there are laws against same-sex relationships in Cameroon, so it's a very dicey situation. I don't necessarily love the cover, but I do love the title, These Letters End in Tears. Now here's what I'm excited about, but I probably don't need to buy it right away because it concerns 3 mid-20th century British women novelists that I adore. I'm interested in all 3 of these women writers, but one of the 3 I'm reading in publication order, and I've got, years of reading left before I would probably pick this book up or read it from cover to cover. It's a biography of these 3 writers. It's called Rural Hours, The Country Lives of Virginia Woolf, Sylvia Townsend Warner, and Rosamund Lehman. So in 1917, Virginia Woolf arrives at Asham on the Sussex Downs. In 1930, feeling jittery about her writing career, Sylvia Townsend Warner spots a modest workman's cottage for sale on the Dorset coast, and in 1941, Rosamund Lehman settles in a Berkshire village, seeking a lover's retreat, a refuge from war, and a means of becoming a writer again. I'm reading more than I usually do from the synopsis, but it's quite well written, and I mean, it sounds absolutely fascinating. Maybe I would read it before I get to the end of Rosamund Lehman's oeuvre. Doesn't that sound fascinating? Well, maybe not for you, but it is for me. This one will surprise some of you more than anything else on my list, because this is not your typical Shawn the Book Maniac pick, but I'm interested in the topic. I'd probably be better off reading a nonfiction book, but this novel caught my eye. I can't remember who was talking about it or where I saw it, but it's called Can't We Be Friends? A novel of Ella Fitzgerald and Marilyn Monroe. The co-authors are Denny Bryce and Eliza Knight. And I am not interested in celebrities, usually. Certainly not all that interested in Marilyn Monroe. I mean, vaguely, just in a distant way, in a way that I would never pick up a biography or a novel based on her life. But this one, because of the transracial friendship, which I didn't really know about, didn't know that they were friends, I'd probably still rather read a nonfiction book, but it does sound interesting. This is a book that I would probably be most inclined to try on audio if I could get access to it. Okay, now we're into April. This is called Goodbye Birdie Greenwing by Erica Waller. A British writer, she lives in Brighton, and her earlier novel, 2021, is called Dog Days. This one is about a group of three female friends. Perhaps the protagonist, Birdie, she's been at loose ends ever since her twin sister and her husband passed away 8 years ago. And it's the friendship. I love friendship novels if they're well done. Based on 17 ratings, again, people that are reading the advanced review copies, it's got a 4.94 rating. So I might wait for a few more reviews, but it does sound interesting. This is another book from And Other Stories. It's a novella called Lublin by Manya Wilkinson. Don't know anything about the author. It's a group of Jewish kids in Eastern Europe. Well, where is Lublin? Lublin's in Poland. So it's a group of three young Jewish boys in Poland. And based on the synopsis, it seems like it's set back in history, the 19th century. Or I can't make head or tail of the synopsis, but nonetheless, I'm intrigued. Manya Wilson is a New Yorker, but has lived in the north of England for over 20 years. I'm excited about this one. Also coming out in April. This is a prose collection, so I don't know what that means. Is that a short story? Oh, essays. An essay collection by Danielle Dutton. And I loved her Margaret I, a historical novel about Margaret Cavendish from the 17th century. And this is a collection of her essays or prose writings. It has got the lovely title, Prairie, Dresses, Art, Other. Look at that cover. That's all I need to know. And here is a novel by a writer from France, Clara Dupont-Monaud. I'm sure there is a French pronunciation that I would never be able to accomplish. And the novel is called And the Stones Cry Out, translated from the French by Ben Faccini. I don't know how to pronounce the name of the indie press that is publishing the English translation. MacLehose Press. Clara Dupont-Monaud is also a journalist, born in 1973. This is a family story centering on a child with black eyes that float in and out of focus. The story is set in Cévennes, if you know anything about that. I don't know much about that. And there are ancient stones. It's called A Fable of Our Time, the portrait of a family adapting to their circumstances. I'd need to know quite a bit more about it before purchasing it, but something about it when I first heard about it caught my eye. Cerys Davis is a Welsh writer who rarely sets any of her fiction in Wales. I have read a couple of her books and really enjoyed them, but I'm behind now, so I'm not going to rush out and buy this, despite having enjoyed everything I've read by her. But this one is called Clear. It's about a minister dispatched to a remote island off of Scotland. Okay, now we're into May. Colm Toibin is a gay Irish writer, and I have enjoyed everything I've read by him, but there's at least 4 or 5 of his novels I haven't read yet, so I shouldn't be in a big hurry to read this one, but this is called Long Island, and it's a sequel to Brooklyn. Now, Brooklyn is one that I did do as an audiobook and loved it. It was a 5-star read for me, so that's probably why it caught my eye. It's with the same characters as in Brooklyn. Brooklyn was actually made into a movie that I've never watched, but set 20 years later. That's all I need to know. This next one is not a debut novel, but I had never heard of the author. It's called Housemates by Emma Copley Eisenberg. This is a queer novel. 2 young housemates on a road trip in fractured America. Coming of age. Based on 2 ratings, it has a 5-star rating, average rating on Goodreads. This is another one of my very most anticipated releases for 2024, and I've already been in touch with the author and his publisher to get a e-copy of the ARC so that I can interview the author. This is In Tongues by Thomas Grattan. Thomas Grattan is the author of The Recent East, which was one of my top reads a couple of years ago. I have an interview with Tom that I'll put a link to in the show notes, and I'm just over the moon that he has a new novel coming out. So, this one is about another young gay man who upends the lives of a powerful art world couple in this steamy novel of self-discovery. Woohoo! I can't wait. So stay tuned. I'm definitely going to, as long as I get the e-copy in time, I'm going to read it and probably not talk about it here very much until my interview with Tom Grattan goes live around the time of the May 21st publication. Very excited as well about Ronan Hession's 3rd novel coming out in May. It's Ghost Mountain, and he was one of my very first mystery guests. I'll put a link to that in the show notes where he unveils the cover and talks about the novel. My paper ARC copy came in the mail. I'm looking forward to reading it and perhaps having him come on the channel as well. And it is a fable-like novel about a mountain. Again, the early reviews, he sent out ARCs to lots of people that have already reviewed it on Twitter, and the response has been glowing. Next is a novel called Bird Eye by Judith Hennigan, and I don't know if you'll remember, 3 years ago or something, I read, let's see, was it her debut? No, I don't think it was her debut, but I read her most recent novel. I'm pretty sure it was her most recent novel, at least for adults, called Snegorochka. I didn't do a full review, but I really enjoyed it, and it made me want to follow her and see what she did next, and this is what she has done. Bird Eye, coming out, as I said, in May, a novel which shows us what the hippie dream looks like a half-century later. That sounds pretty interesting. Okay, we're on the home stretch because you can't find too much information out at the end of December about new releases in the second half of the forthcoming year, so here's 3 for June and 1 for August. In June, here is another queer novel. I believe it's a debut. Hombrecito by Santiago Jose Sanchez. A queer coming-of-age story about a young immigrant, his mother and his motherland. The country of origin is Colombia, but he and his mother are in America, and there's all kinds of queer and immigrant-related goings-on. I like that cover, too. This is a reissue of a book I think it might have won. I'm not sure if it won the Booker, but it was on one of the long list or the short list. It's called Rhine Journey by Anne Schlee. It was originally published in 1980. The setting is a Victorian pleasure cruise and a chance encounter set in 1851. I absolutely do not need to know another thing about it. Sounds interesting, even though it's got a 3.5 rating. It's coming out by McNally Editions, and they put out some really attractive reissued books that need to be back in print, and I'm all in favor of that. Here is another one that I am over the moon about the fact that it's coming out. It is the first novel, the debut novel, but the second book by the indigenous writer from the Maine Penobscot Nation, Morgan Talty. Fire Exit, coming out in June. I loved his debut short story collection called Night of the Living Rez, and this is his first novel. Morgan Talty is very active on social media. Like I didn't do a full review of Night of the Living Rez. I just talked about it at my Friday Reads, but he found it within days, my reference to it, because I have details in my show notes about which books I'm talking about, and watched what I said and left a comment. He's like that. And he has a baby boy. I don't think it's a baby anymore. It's almost a year old. And fabulous pictures all over social media. It's a very lovable, loving guy. Fire Exit is also set on the same Penobscot Reservation in Maine. And it is about an Indigenous man who has been separated from his family, and there's a family secret. There's more information in the synopsis than I want to know about, so I've scanned it and closed my eyes, and you can read more if you want, but he's a marvelous writer. In August, I have the next novel by Caro de Robertis. I loved their earlier novels, which used a different name. You can look that up. Their novel that I absolutely loved is Cantorus, and then I had a pseudo buddy read of The President and the Frog with the lovely Alba of Siriella. And this new one coming out in August is The Palace of Aeros. I have to say that I'm a little leery of it just because it's a mythic retelling, and I have such a profound allergy that I don't think I will ever get over to mythic retellings. And so the protagonist is Psyche, the mythological Psyche, and she is, I think, hot for women. So that's fabulous. Aphrodite is in the story, and Zeus and Eros, and oh my goodness. So I would be willing to give it a try because I love de Robertis' writing, but I really don't like mythic retellings. Hey, well, this is a late-breaking addendum to my 2024 anticipated releases, so I'm going to try to be really brief. They'll be sorted by month, but this is an addendum, so they're going to be all over the place as I talk about them. Here's another Irish novel called The Amendments by Niamh Mulvey. I'm not sure how to pronounce her first name. Coming out in April. A novel about 3 generations of women. And that's all I'm going to say. You can click on the link, the Goodreads link, to find out more, but it did catch my eye. Another work of Irish fiction. This is a collection of short stories by Lucy Caldwell called Openings. 13 stories. And it's coming out also right at the tail end of April. And I have read one collection of short stories by Lucy Caldwell that I absolutely loved. I have another one on the shelf that I want to get to, but any short story collection that Lucy Caldwell puts out, I am here for. Multitudes is the one I read. Intimacies is the one I have on my shelf, yet to read, and then this new one. I didn't care for her novel that came out last year, but her short stories are bangers, as they say. Here is a Palestinian novel that definitely caught my eye. I found out about all of these literally hours after I had recorded the video. Before the Queen Falls Asleep by Hazuma Habayeb, translated from the Arabic by K. Heikkinen, coming out at the end of March. The baby girl is born to parents who expected a boy and raised her kind of as a boy. And that's all I need to know about that opening premise. I think it's a debut, but I'm not sure. Harry Kunzru is a novelist. I've only read his novel White Tears. I loved it. I want to reread it. I'm going to be reading Red Pill this year. He has a new novel coming out, so I always take note of when he's got new stuff coming out. It's called Blue Ruin, an intriguing title, coming out in May. It's about beauty, power, and capitalism's influence on art. And finally, Helen Humphreys has a new novel. I'm a little bit lukewarm about her new novel because her most recent 2 novels I thought were abysmally awful. I love all of her nonfiction that I've read, and I absolutely adored The Lost Garden. And I have dear friends in the bookish social community who are horrified that I didn't love her 2 most recent novels. Rabbitfoot Bill was one, almost unreadable, and also something about a Scottish fish tie maker that I couldn't stay awake for. But this one, called Followed by the Lark, it's got a 4.56 rating based on 9 ratings. It comes out in early February, and I believe it's about, or certainly inspired by, Henry David Thoreau, so it might actually be about him. Let's see. Yes, it's about him, so that might be more to my liking. And I know there's a lot of you out there that love all of her fiction, and so check it out. I'm hoping it's a win after a couple misses. So those are my 5 late-breaking additions to the list. All right, so that's what I've got. Which of these strike you as the most interesting? Any other comments would be most welcome. Thanks for watching.